Hello and welcome to episode 99, Lucky 99. It's a pleasure today to be joined by Sara Borjas. Who is she? She's a Xicanx pocha. She's from the Americas before it was stolen and its people were colonized, and she's a Fresno poet. Her debut collection, Heart Like a Woman, Mouth Like a Cliff, Heart Like a Window, Mouth Like a Cliff, which is right over my shoulder here, was published by Noemi Press in 2019, won a 2020 American Book Award. Sara was named one of Poets and Writers 2019 debut poets, is a 2017 CantoMundo Fellow, and the recipient of the 2014 Blue Mesa Poetry Prize. Her work can be found in Plowshares, The Rumpus, Poem a Day by the Academy of American Poets. I get that in my email every day. Alta and The Offing, amongst others. She teaches innovative undergraduates at UC Riverside, believes that all Black lives matter and will resist white supremacy until Black liberation is realized. She lives in Los Angeles and she stays rooted in Fresno. She digs oldies, outer space, aromatics, and tiny prints, is about decentering whiteness in literature, creative writing, and in daily life. And it's such a pleasure to have you on. How are you today, Sara?
Hi, good. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. I think you're the first to be zooming in from New Hampshire, getting your creativity on over there.
Tight.
Right? Wish you great luck. I'm sure there's gonna be some great work that comes out of that.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. But I do appreciate you making time. I know that it's scarce, and then you're on your fellowship there and all that. I love to go back in time, back in the day when I was young. I'm not a kid anymore. What's childhood, adolescence like? Was it a print-rich environment for you? I know language, bilingualism is a big, one of the themes of your writing. Like, did you grow up speaking only English? Did you grow up speaking Spanglish? Understood everything but didn't speak much? Like just kind of in general, what was your relationship with language and with words?
I I just speak English. I only grew up speaking English, and I'm like highly assimilated. And now at first, I think when I was younger, I was always getting side-eyed, because I didn't speak Spanish and I was apparently supposed to. And then I think as I got older, I started to understand that why my parents didn't teach me Spanish, that they didn't want me to get, discriminated the way they were and treated with indignity the way they were. And so they did the best they could to make me as, seemingly heteronormative as possible. And, and in that case, I don't speak Spanish. I can understand some, but that's only because I've been working in restaurants for a long time. And as we all know, you go to any restaurant, there's definitely some immigrant or some Latino in the back cooking your food, doesn't matter where it is. And so that's where I learned Spanish, really. So my kind of relationship to language is that it doesn't feel like a defining factor of me or who I am. It kind of feels like this kind of like a consequence of history. And I think that's why when people started, like my homegirls would call me a pocha, I was like, hi, cool. I don't know what that means. So I would just laugh, shake my head because I don't speak Spanish. And I'm like, I was just too ashamed to ask because then I want to get the whole like fucking lecture. But then when I figured out what it meant, I was like, oh yeah, like I'm not tripping. That's totally what it is. Like I'm definitely like assimilated and forgotten my heritage, but that's not on me.
Right.
It doesn't, so I'm not really, I don't feel like it's something I really had any agency in. And so it's, language is like, it's a tool, and it's a consequence and it's an effect. But I think it's just interesting because of, it got here.
Sure.
And that's the part I'm like interested in, and I'm kind of feel like there's significance in for me. But you know, I definitely on some Spanglish-ish now. I was in like a lecture last week, and I was like, I'm just gonna make up a Spanglish word and use it and just see what happens. You know, I just was like, I don't speak Spanish, but I don't speak Spanglish. I'm like, but that's what it is. You just make stuff up, and you know, and I don't know. I've just been thinking about that lately. For those of us like coming from similar places, like I am.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. You talked about, you said, "Oh, I'm not gonna ask what pocha is because I'm gonna get the lecture." What would the lecture have been?
Oh, the lecture would be, you know, you should be ashamed that you don't speak your mother tongue. And I'd be like, whose mother tongue? That's probably what I would say. I am like, the colonizers, the ones who like rolled through and like killed everyone and raped everyone into existence. Yeah, I don't feel bad about that.
That might not have been the most that might have been not the conversation they were looking for at the time, huh? Okay, I got you.
No, not really.
When you're talking about, you know, your parents had the indignities and racism, you know, when speaking Spanish. Was it something where, like, was it legislated? Was it like one of those, like in school, where they were, you know, hit or punished because they spoke Spanish, or was it more like outside the classroom, or both?
I think it's both.
Yeah,
it's both. Like there's it's like the reality. I think now it's, when I hear like my mom trying to tell me something, she'll say it in Spanish. She's like, there's the only way to say it. Like there's no way to say this. Like you can't say what happened. You can only say it this way. And so I think in a lot of ways, like her reality was denied, you know, and that has like existential ontological consequences,
right,
for everybody who has that experience, that you just don't exist in this way. You know, you're not real in this way. And I think, you know, as far as like specific examples, as far as I know, yeah, they would be punished in school. You know, my mom didn't speak English till she was like 8, and my dad, I'm not really sure about my dad, but you know, dads don't talk as much as moms talk. So I'm not sure, still figuring that one out. But she, yeah, like they put notes on her shirt and send her home and say, come back when she can speak English, like constantly. And she would just be at work with my grandma, sitting under some trunk or getting dragged on a cotton sack while my grandma picked cotton, or, you know, things is terrible. Like where if she couldn't say she had to go to the restroom in English, they wouldn't let her go, even though they knew she had to go to the restroom.
Okay.
You know, and she was like 5,
right,
and she would pee her pants, and they would make her sit there to shame her. That's like super traumatizing. That happens over and over and over. And I think in a way, like those early experiences just became like a door that probably my mom had to walk through every time she said anything or asked for anything or asked for permission for anything, that she said it right, that someone understood. And you could, I mean, I can see it now, you know, in her timidness, you know.
Yeah, lifelong. Oh man. I wonder what you were reading then as a kid. You know, did you see yourself represented in you know, all the different subcultures that we all have? Like, did you see yourself in what you read? Did you you know, were you into comic books? Were you into like fantasy? Were you into like, I don't know, historical fiction? I don't know, what were you into?
I'm like, I was about the historical fiction when I was
all
5.
about
I was
that,
kidding.
right? 4 years old, you know.
I wish. I mean, who would I be now, you know? But
reading like David Halberstam or something like that, you know, George Will.
I'm reading Howard Zinn.
yeah. Well, I think that should be requested. That should be required reading, right? 6 years old, 7 years old.
Absolutely.
Get them early.
You know, when I was growing up, I was reading. I guess I was reading like Boxcar Children. That was my jam. My brother was on his Goosebumps. Like I was reading all the Judy Blume. And my mom, she read hella romance novels. She was really into Danielle Steele. So we had like, this is weird. Well, I guess it's not weird. She had a bookshelf in her bathroom, like a for real bookshelf. She has kind of a big bathroom. And it was full. And I remember I would just go in the bathroom and hang out and like check out her books. She would have like pretty much all Danielle Steele, like Gone with the Wind, and then like the Bible. And I read all that shit. Like I read every Danielle Steele. Like that was what I grew up reading and watching a lot of Lifetime movies.
Yeah.
Because again, that's what my mom watched. And my mom was at home raising me, my brother, and my sister. My dad was a teacher. And I just consumed what she had. And she was an avid reader. She was always reading, like all day. And I think I just kind of like did what she did. Yeah, so I didn't read any POC or anything till college. As far as I remember, it wasn't until I took a Chicano literature class with Alex Espinoza, and then I had taken a class called Multicultural American Literature with I think Dr. Samina Najmi. And it wasn't then until I read M. Butterfly, I read Tomas Rivera, Maricela Norte.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Elena Viramontes. I read Love and Rockets for the first time.
Okay.
But I was probably like 22, 23 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first time I had read anybody brown.
Wow.
Or black. I mean, other than, probably like the Negro Speaks of Rivers at one time, Yeah.
So Langston. Wow, shout out to Maricela Norte. She's like the bus rider, right? She writes a lot about riding the bus in LA and the people that's oversimplifying. She's got some incredible work.
Yeah, it's called a Peeping Tom Tom Girl. And I actually ran into her a couple of weeks ago too. I went to a museum.
Nice.
I had a poem joined with an exhibit there with this artist, this amazing artist named Mofa Takadiwa. And she's like, she works there. And I was like, she's like, what's your name? And I was like, what's your name? I was like, are you Maricela Norte?
Oh, that's cool.
It was cool. It was really cool.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I got to get a new copy of that. I remember I had a copy of that in my classroom library probably 8 or 9 years ago. And I think it was borrowed or given away. Oh, very cool. Tell me a little bit about Tomas Rivera. I know, isn't there like a prize named after him? Like maybe writing prize?
There's I don't know if there's a writing, maybe there is, but there's like at UC Riverside, the library is named after him.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking about.
I think he was the first Chicano chancellor for the UC system, University of California. And our library, I teach at UC Riverside, is named after him. It's called the Tomas Rivera Library. Nice. And there's also a position, an endowed chair position that's called the Tomas Rivera Endowed Chair. And that person also conducts the Tomas Rivera series at the university. It's the English department and creative writing department. Okay. It's like a shared position and a shared series. Yeah.
Oh, nice. So you said, maybe 22, 19, 21, something like that before you read, people of color, writing by people of color. Like before that, would you have said there was a hole, or you didn't like hole, HOLE, or you didn't know it existed kind of thing, like you didn't know there was a void until you were able to fill the void?
Yeah, I didn't know it existed. I was very, I don't know. I think I thought I was white for a long time, or I don't know what I thought I was, but I know I was ashamed to be Mexican, like really hard, to the point where like I would deny that I was Mexican or Chicana. I didn't even know what Chicana meant. Haven't even heard that word until I took Chicano studies class at Fresno City College. Shout out to Matt Espinoza. But, I was like, I had no idea. I didn't even know Chicanos existed. So, I there was no hole. There was no conception. Like my paradigm was like, either you're white or you're not, and you should be white. And so I think I kind of like tried to do everything I could to align with whiteness, you know. And I think because I was so probably, I don't know, had such desire, like deep desire and dreams of whiteness, I wasn't really looking for anything else. Or nor did I like intuit that there was anything missing. I didn't know that we were out here like that.
I wonder, you know, about the term pocha or pochex, you know, the history of the word is that it's like, it means like an overripe fruit or something like that. And right, I remember reading, I think for summer reading in high school, I read the book Pocho by Villarreal, which is such a memorable book for me. You know, you know, the best books are very specific to one's experience, but also I think universal, you know, not being Pocho, not being, you know, not being Latino. But the book was so good because of this idea of like, you know, he's living in two worlds. He goes to school and it's todo inglés. He goes to home and it's todo en español. Right. His dad's like old school. His dad was like fought in the Mexican Revolution. And then, but he's also like, you know, his dad's like a tough guy, but the kid's not, you know, he's, you know, and it's just so good with like the living in two worlds type of thing. So I wonder what pocha, pochex means to you.
I think, well, I don't, my sense is that like I'm supposed to have feelings of shame, you know, around that word. And I know that it's a derogatory term. Like, I know when I've said it, people are like, and they're like, and I've done readings where it's been in my bio and people have written me be like, I'm not comfortable saying this, really? Announcing you this way. And I'm like, then you could just say self-identified. So you don't feel like you're the one called it, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I know it's, yeah, I know that I'm supposed to apparently have shame around, but I think if I lost some heritage that is Mexican, that is Spanish, right? I'd have never asked for it anyways, is my sense. And I don't really feel like I'm more sad about losing. I have nothing of my indigeneity at all. I don't know. Absolutely nothing, you know? That's what I'm sad about. Like, that's a word. Like, if there was a word for pocha, but it meant not, you know, lost my Mexican heritage, but lost my indigenous heritage, that word would mean something to me. That word would be felt. But the word pocha and pocho and those types of, like, it's always like an accusation that, you know, you lost some part you're supposed to have. And I'm like, I was ever supposed to have that part. None of us were supposed to have that part. And I'm not saying, you know, it's a rich culture. It's part of me, whether I like it or not. So I don't feel like I need to totally deny it, but I'm also just not trying to embrace it like that. You know, and I just want to be clear about that. So when that word, you know, kind of comes around, or, you know, peeks through, or someone wants to make a joke, I understand that it's mad dynamic and very rich, and there's a lot of like belonging and acceptance and kind of power being played with. And I just feel like I'm over that. I'm beyond that. I'm like, let's do the next thing. I'm not really trying to have this old conversation anymore about being whitewashed, like, and being like, it's next. you know?
Yeah. So you talk about, I mean, I think I want to make sure I'm getting it right. So you talking about earlier, you know, like the big thing is like the lack of agency, right? Like, you had no role in this. If there's this lost heritage, you know, then you're like, that was forced upon me. That was not something that was not my choice, right?
Yeah, it was a survival tactics.
Sure.
You know,
sure.
It's survival tactics. Like, I'm not mad about my mom and dad like using survival tactics. I'm like, man, you guys are innovative as heck, you know?
Hmm.
People of color, people have been colonized, people have been oppressed, people have been kidnapped, people have been killed. That's why, that's why,
Mm.
whiteness chases, whiteness chases Black culture and fetishizes Black culture and fetishizes, Latinx culture. It's good because because we were very creative because we've had to be.
Yeah. Wow. Do you feel like in, I don't know, last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, with writers like you, like Alan Chorazo we talked about, I mean, there's so many others who have kind of like reclaimed pocho as a positive, or at least not a negative.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you've seen a change in the way that the term has been seen in the last, again, 5 years, 10 years, whatever?
Mm-hmm. I don't really encounter the word a lot. Honestly, the only time I really use that word is like with Alan.
All right.
I think his Twitter handle is like Pocho Boy Meets World.
Yeah, that's one of the greatest Twitter
I
handles
love
there is.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't talk about it much. I don't talk about it much unless I'm doing an interview like this, with somebody who asked. But as far as like it coming up and like,
Yeah.
it doesn't really come up, and I definitely understand that it doesn't. I think like, well, when I'm with Alan or someone else who's like pocha or pocha-ish or whatever, we'll like make jokes about it. And like, my cousin will send me stuff like on Instagram. Like I guess he's in Hawaii, and he sent me there's a restaurant called like Billion Pocha. So he's like, oh, I guess Sara Borjas opened up a restaurant in Hawaii, y'all. So we joke around in that way, but it doesn't really come up, and I don't, as far as like the conversation changing, I know for me, it's light. It's kind of like, I feel like wrangling the word and like kind of not breaking it down, but like contextualizing it in my poetry and like in Alan's poetry. It kind of makes it so that it's a marker for us, but not like a destination. It's like, it's big. We've like thought about it to the point where we don't really need it. It's useful in like transcending it, and it's useful in like transforming it. But as far as like taking it into the future with us, it'll mark this time in that journey. But I don't think that it's going to evolve necessarily.
That makes sense.
I'm looking for new terms. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
As we've got into more recent years, and after college into grad school and teaching, all that, like, who are some of the writers who just absolutely thrilled you, who you're just like, wow, the alternate feelings of like, I could never do this / I really want to do this, like, just, like stunning type of writers and writing. What has really thrilled you that way?
Oh man, Marwa Halal. I love Marwa Halal's work. She has this poem called Who Real that's on the Poem a Day if anybody wants to check it out.
Spell that last name for me, would you?
Yeah, it's Helal.
Okay.
She had a book come out called Invasive Species. Oh, so good. It's just so good. I love the like Renaissance, or I don't know if it's a Renaissance with it, but there's a lot of this like historical docu-poetics.
Okay. Whoa.
And that just seems like I'm here for it. And Marwa Halal's book is doing that. Aria Aber also had a book called Hard Damage. Love that book.
She's incredible.
Layli Long Soldier's book, Whereas, like just the interventions of poets, like kind of using language to like assert power or take power in these spaces, just seems, I mean, like a type of futurism, that I'm really here for. Anthony Cody's Borderland Apocrypha, Tongo Eisen Martin's work just always takes me out. I'm like, every time I hear Tonga, I'm like, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah,
But,
I know, right? I know.
And then like the people that I always just go back to are Roque Dalton,
Mm.
Bob Kaufman, Alejandra Pizarnik. Man. And you know what too? I have some students who are like doing it,
All
and
right.
so they don't, they might know, they might not know, but I'm like, man, I can't wait to see, like I see their individual poems and workshops and stuff, but and I know they're applying to MFAs and things like that.
Yeah.
But I can't wait to see their collections in like however many years. Like that's gonna be like, that's what I'm waiting for.
Yeah. Note to self: if I ever get the luck again to, I got to read / be part of a night with Tongo, and like note to self, like put him last, because whoever's got to follow him, I'm not trying to follow him. Like, you know,
yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. You were talking about Marwa, the first one, right? You said, she and Arya and some of them, like they use language to assert power. Am I saying it correctly? Would that be something like when you're teaching them, like could you point that out to students, like where that happens, or is that more just like an alchemy type of thing? You know what I mean? Could you be like, this right here is where?
Oh no, I could point out where it happens.
Yeah.
I can point out where like Marwa's poem "Who Real" is written from right to left. Like that alone is like power snatch, like that alone. She's like, in the poem, she's like, oh, I bet you're really discombobulated right now, reader, because you're not used to,
Man.
It just really like points out the decoding. Like this, I think that's all the time, like the decoding that like non-English, people of color, people at like various intersectionalities, especially in classrooms, have to do to like understand what they're being taught. It's like, okay, this person's saying this, I don't know what that means, but this is what it might mean. This is what that means emotionally for me. This means I have to morph in this moment and maybe change, and then I have to like put it back together in a way that I understand that I need to say it this way so that it's acceptable, so that I can get an A in this class. It's so much, like I said, critical thinking that we do like intuitively,
Yeah.
And so I think Marwa's work she just does like what she does when she reads, and any reader who's on some heteronormative perspective would struggle.
You get flipped.
And and I think that process of making someone struggle the way, enacting the struggle in the language is apparent, and it's hard, you feel it.
Yeah. Maybe like as close to empathy as possible, maybe like a sort of empathy or sympathy at the very least. What about people who, I might do this in a few minutes, what about people who are trying to like kind of decode your poetry, or like, it means this, like, are you somebody who's like, it means 100 different things to 100 different people, or is it like, no, I'm trying to get some stuff across here? Somewhere in the middle of that spectrum, maybe.
Like if someone asks me and wants to know, I'm happy to like share what I was thinking, or which also might have changed, but sure. I mean, I feel like once it's out, and I don't think, I'm not here to explain it. It's whatever it is to them. I don't think poems, and I mean, this depends on what you think about poetry, but I think for me today is like, poems don't happen when you write them. Poems happen in a way when you write them. They happen in a way when you conceptualize them, but they don't like happen in the world until someone reads it. And when someone reads it, they're bringing their whole life with them, and their whole life next to me is the subtext. So that poem is going to be a different poem for every single person that reads it, depending on what they're bringing in their life and their experience and what they feel at that day, or maybe they're struggling, maybe they're having a good day. The poem's going to hit different. And so I honor that part
Yeah.
about poetry, and I do think poetry ultimately is communal, you know, and I think it's important that other folks read it and just we're not alone for a moment. And so if that's like hella different from what I meant, or they're like, oh, I'm not this one line, but I'm like, oh, I hate that line. Great. Great. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me as long as it's not getting kind of like utilized for anything evil. I'm totally good with it being whatever it is. But if people want to say like, oh, you're ashamed, and oh, like I see, like I totally get it, like I would be ashamed too. So I'd be like, oh, skirt, no, hold on.
Yeah.
No, that's where I'd have a boundary. And if that was ever said, I would absolutely clarify.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. No letting Trump use it for his campaign rally or something like that, right? Like no. All right. There's got to be a limit. There's got to be a limit to how many meetings.
There's got to be a limit, man. Yeah.
Shoot. Are there poems, or I'm not going to put you on the spot, but like that you can like freestyle, or that you like know that you've memorized, like, you know, a line, 7 lines, the whole thing?
There's like one poem that I could probably do from memory, but there's only one, and I don't know why it's just that one. I think maybe it's because I revised it so much, like for so long, that it's just, you know, it's burned into there. But I don't know. I don't memorize my poems, but I want to. I you know, I talked to Tongo, you know, and he's always, I'm like, what's up? Like, how do you do that memorization thing? And, you know, after hearing him explain like his process and what he thinks, I kind of feel like there's a power in, I know there's power in embodying poetry. Like I make my students memorize at least one poem, but I don't know. It feels like, I don't know if I'm ready to get that close. I know that probably sounds strange, but like I'm obviously already really close and very open. But it's like another layer of closeness of like taking it in that I don't know that I'm like good to do right now.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, that's another thing about your collection is it's like, it's not like it's 3 poems. Like there are a lot of them. You know, so it's not like, oh, I've got 3 poems, I can easily, you know, memorize them. I appreciate that. So what were there any moments in particular that, like, you know, the light bulb moments where it's like, oh man, like I can do this, like people respond to my poetry, or, you know, maybe it's simply about you, like this hits hard, this hits home, like I can do this, I can get, you know, I can get published, I can make people, you know, people gonna want to listen to me, like I love, you know, the presentation of poetry. Like what kind of made you into a poet with a capital P, maybe, you know?
I definitely only kept writing poetry. Well, I only started writing poetry, I think, because I had to take an elective in college. So I took a poetry workshop with Juan Luis Guzman, who was a graduate student there at Fresno State at the time. And shout out to Juan, because I was writing my like Elizabethan sonnets, you know, super hard. And he was like, great, keep going.
Oh man.
And I don't know. And I still have like the notebook where I would write stuff and he has his notes in there.
Oh,
and man. I was like, and now we're homies. So I'm like, man, you're wild. Like, why would you tell me to keep going? Like, I was for real writing Elizabethan sonnets for like 2 years. He was like, he's just like, I saw something beyond it, you know, and I don't know what he saw, but like, he encouraged me. And I in college, I mean, now I'm like, you know, I lecture these big courses with 300 students, but I mean, I did not speak one word in college, like at all. Like not a peep. Like I went to class, I went home, I went to work, I had a couple of jobs. I was super quiet and super just felt, like I didn't belong there a lot of the time. I think I felt really, and maybe this is how my mom feels too about, when you kind of get shut down in the language that, I think I've just been shut down in the past, just being a woman, being a girl, not really being, no one wants to really hear what I have to say. They just want me to make them a burrito and get them a beer. But, I thought everything I had to say was dumb. I remember I would be in class, thinking thoughts, thinking hearing the teacher. And but I was like, oh, never say that because it's probably wrong.
Ooh.
And so I never spoke. And I imagine I can still see. Now I'm like, hey, I think I have an idea. Do you want to hear it? But I can still see my mom, and I just see women, women, my family, just do it. Just, you could see them, the wheels turning, and they're like, they want to say something, but they're like, I don't know if I'm smart enough to say this. I don't know if I know enough to say this thing. And so they just don't. And damn, we fucking miss out because of that. The whole world loses. And that's what I was doing for a long time in those classes. And it was only that written feedback that made me feel like, okay, this poem is something that somebody is responding to, or they don't think it's stupid. They don't think it's dumb. And then I kept doing it. I submitted a little poem to the Larry Levis Prize at Fresno State for an undergraduate, and Phil Levine chose my poem as the runner-up.
Wow.
And I think that was really validating, and kind of just made me feel like, okay, it's not dumb. My feelings and my thoughts are not dumb, and so maybe I could just see what's in there. And I kind of just kept going, I just kept going. And even when I went to grad school, I wasn't trying to be a poet. I would just be like, oh, I'm going to grad school. And I wouldn't say for what, because then people would be like, well, what are you going to do with that? And I'd be like, I don't know. Of course, I don't know. But, just such a product, capitalistic perspective about education and learning, which I never really felt, but I knew other people were expecting me to have answers like that, and I just didn't. And I still don't, so if now I know questions okay, do I, I'm here at this artist residency, do I want to write another book? Why am I,
Please,
we were chatting earlier.
Please, we need another one.
I write poems, but I don't know what they are. I'm not doing them for anything. I'm just doing them because I'm doing them because I'm trying to figure myself out. I'm trying to make myself, I spent so much of my life dismissing myself and dismissing my family and everybody, because that's what society did. And I just embrace that. And now I think I'm just trying to imagine myself and my family into realness, And I think the first book was definitely me trying to make myself real and legitimize myself. And now I don't know what the question is, but I know I'm writing a lot of poems, but they're not anywhere. They're just in my computer and in my diary. But that still makes me I'm a poet. I don't know. I just don't feel that I have to have publications to be a poet. It'd be cool if someone read them,
Right.
It'd be cool if I could share them, but I don't know. I'm not really tripping too hard.
All right.
So we'll see.
I appreciate that. I wonder how you seek out the type of students, as a professor, the type of you as a, whatever college junior, that you have in your class now, how you seek them out, how you pump them up, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love finding them. You're a teacher, you get it. It's And it's not like the teacher, it's not like if we were just hanging out somewhere and I read their work, I'd be like, hey, I'd be like,
Right.
do you want to talk? It didn't
Right.
matter like that there's this dynamic, but because we are in that space where it's an institutionalized space where there is that dynamic, I understand that, what I say might carry more weight to them right now,
Yeah.
And so I'm making sure that I'm using my privilege that I definitely have, to like give people space to say the things that I know they want to say. I can see it in their work, but they're like me, like they're not saying it. They're scared to say it, or they don't think it's right, or they're ashamed that they're going to look like bad people. Everybody wants to be very acceptable type of person in a poem, but none of us are acceptable as a people. and when I see somebody like taking the risk to be honest in a poem, there's so much power. I try to just do the best I can, just say I see you, and thank you for doing that. I would love to help you revise this poem if you were interested, and if you're not, that's cool too.
Yeah.
And I kind of just put it out there, and if they want to, usually they're just waiting for someone to ask them. Because a lot of times no one asks them. Like no one asks me, like, what do you think? What do you care about? What do you want? Like, what do you have desire? Like what do you want in your life? No one asks me that. And so I just try to now just ask, and it really goes a long way to be curious about stories and about people who don't feel who feel like invisibilized in a lot of ways too.
Yeah.
So I'm down.
Yeah. I bet your students definitely don't feel like numbers. They feel like she knows my name, she knows my story, she knows. That's cool.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Heart Like a Window, Mouth Like a Cliff, 2019. So good. Such a great collection. I'm kind of laughing as you were about like how you were big into like Elizabethan or whatever sonnets and such. Like, I mean, you have a lot of different forms. I mean, you do well with the like the binary Petrarchan sonnet, which I had to look up. I know what those mean individually, but it's like, all right, let's put those together. You do the Ars Poetica, which I know is like a institution, I guess, in poetry. You do the We Are Too Big for This House, which is based on Anish Kapoor. Am I saying the name right? Like the
Anish Kapoor, yeah.
Yeah, the memory installation, which is so cool. I want to ask you about that in a minute. Mexican Bingo is just one example where it's like pretty much just straight prose. I mean, you have mostly prose. The sound and the beat and the rhythm. Like, I would love to hear you, like a live reading. Like, man, you must, the way just how the poetry is 10 out of 10 on the page, but it's going to be a 13 out of 10, to hear you read it. Like, did you have to unlearn form, or was like prose like your default mode when you wrote this collection?
I think all my poems start off as prose.
Same.
So I just free write. That's kind of how my process is. I just have like intense feelings, deep feelings, and I just kind of spill out.
Yeah.
And so they're always in prose, like, and I think it's like as they develop, as my ideas in the poem develop, then the form might change. But if it's prose, it's probably because it didn't need to change. It's just stayed its original form.
Yeah.
And I wasn't until it, like the binary Petrarchan sonnet, and like We Are Too Big for This House. Those are poems that like needed like another way to mean, another way to. And I think for We Are Too Big for This House, that's actually an essay. Because I needed to, I couldn't write the poem. Like I wanted to write the poem that did what this essay did. But I like emotionally could not. And I tried for a really long time and I couldn't. And so I reframed it as an essay because my my amazing friend and at the time editor Carmen Jimenez Smith was like, I don't understand why the speaker is so resentful but so tender towards her parents, and there needs to be a poem that like comes earlier in the book so that those other poems can plunge, you know, the ways that they need to or that they can. And I couldn't. I think the things that I need to say I still can't really say. And so if I wrote it as an essay like the way I did here, then it can, I don't know, it can work. It can work out. And so I had to do it because it wasn't linear. Like there's no, I mean, nothing is linear, but
Right.
This one is especially not linear.
Right.
You know, every time you think a thought, you know, I think the second guessing that I have, or anybody who's just insecure, you know, for many reasons, it's a constant like, okay, this is what I think, and then this is also what I think, and this is what I also think, and then I also think about this. You're constantly like legitimizing and validating, and also like having this like meta conversation with yourself just to say one little thing.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, you know, it's maybe a little hard to see, but on the, I guess the right of your screen is the binary, you know, it's in columns. And it's cool because like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense if you go just like in the column itself, like within the column, but also if you go straight from left all the way to right, you know, and like you said, there's a lot of meta in between, a lot of like half thoughts and that kind of stuff. Yeah, so cool like that. And I wanted to show the one about the installation. We are too big for this house. Correct me if I'm wrong, but basically like the installation was this thing where it's like you were forced to, you like couldn't slide by it, like you couldn't get through to see it because it was like, you know, it was like too narrow, so you had to like go upstairs and you get a whole different view. So like I'm such a huge fan of art being inspired by other art. Like what was how were you inspired by that piece? Like how did that become We Are Too Big for This House, which is what it looks like?
I saw that installation at the Guggenheim in New York, like a hella long time ago. Like it was probably like, I don't know, 2008. I don't know, 2000. And I just am like, it had a really large impact on me because it was this big metal rusted like blimp kind of in this room that when you walk in, it just seems like it's bigger than the room. Like how it can't possibly fit in the room, and yet it's fitting in the room, and you can't like see it because you have to like, you have to like duck around it, and you can't even get through some things. And then there's another place where you go out of the room, and you go into the room different ways. There's like 4 ways to go into the room, I think. And then there's one way where you go outside of the room, and there's just like a big square cut in the wall, and it's the inside like of that blip type of thing, that art piece, and it's completely dark. It looks like it goes on, it's endless,
right?
Like it goes on forever. And it just made me, it just makes me think of my mom, you know. It makes me think of like my family's history, just unknowable, like so gone, so stolen, burned. Like it's unknowable. Like all I can do is look around, peek around, watch my mom, watch my dad, watch how I respond. Well, just watch our families and think about it. But it's so big and so vast and so erased in a lot of ways. Like I'm never going to be able to grasp it. And that installation just had a very it just had a very visceral effect on me.
Oh man.
And yeah.
Wow. I mean, I know they switch out installations really often. Like, I mean, is it still there? I don't know how. I mean, is it still there?
No, it's not there, but I'm sure it's probably traveling.
Sure.
You know, it's Anish Kapoor. He's definitely got some like, I wonder, it's probably on exhibit somewhere right now.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I feel like when I get back to the drawing board and do some poetry, which I don't do enough, like I might use some of like, I love how your titles are so long and so expressive, right? I mean, not all of them, but a lot. Like I wonder if like I just feel like, okay, I come up with a title and like that might just be a springboard. Like, you know, sometimes some poems will be like literally like the first word of the actual poem is a continuation of the title. So like for you, is it like poem first then title, or title first then poem, or it just kind of depends?
Poem first then title for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the title will evolve. Yeah. Then I just work on the poem for the whole time, and then I'll go back to the title. And so sometimes like when I feel like stuck in the body of the poem, I have to reconceptualize like what the poem is doing or what the poem is interrogating. And so that's when I go and relook at the title, because I need to change the direction of the question, of the looking, you know, or the asking. Yeah. And so it goes back and forth, but it's usually like not until the poem is mad developed that I'll go back and start to mess around with the title. Yeah.
With the Spanish that you have in your poetry, is there ever an occasion where you'd be like, I need to translate this, or you're like, nah, this is what it is, like it doesn't need translation, it slows it down, it's not as smooth, that kind of thing?
I have never, not once, thought about translating.
Not even thought about it. I love it.
I've never even, like, you used to ask me, I was like, what? Oh, I'm like, hell no. I don't know. I never thought about it. It's how it comes out, you know. It would not be
it's artificial.
It's not the same thing.
Okay.
Like saying daughter in Spanish and saying daughter in English are not the same thing. They're different types of daughters.
Sure.
You know, they're different, like there's different implications, there's different relationships. They're different. Yeah. And so I can't like to say like, well, if I were to say like, I'm going to translate this word would mean that I'm going to tell a different story. Yeah. But that's not the real story. So I have zero interest in telling that story. Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I can't even tell that story. It's that's not my story. That's not the one I want to write.
Sure. I'm sure you get asked all the time, like, are you the narrator of all of your poems, some of your poems, none of your poems? Are there like just bits and pieces of you in the narrator? Like, you know, is this nonfiction?
This is nonfiction.
Okay.
I am every speaker.
I'm every speaker. All right.
I am every speaker. Yeah. I it's all me. Like parts of myself are amplified in the tone of different poems, you know. Sure. Some of the poems have like attitude that I wish I could have. Some of them talk to, you know, my boss the way I could really want to talk to them. Some of them talk to my brother the way I really want to talk to them. But they're all me, but but I'm the boss. You know, I'm the boss in my poem. I get to say what happens here and whose feelings are real and whose thoughts are dumb and who's this and that. And no one can tell me, like, no one can gaslight me in my poems. That's always something that I really treasure about creative writing, is that if it's yours, it's your imagination. No one can take that from you, and nor should they. They might try, you know, and some teachers try. Not knowing, you know, trying to make little clones of themselves, but man, no one can take that from you. And there's the Minnesota Prison Writers Workshop that I just follow. I'm invested in because my homie Michael Torres. Oh, I know who also probably came up with Alice.
Oh yeah.
You know, he teaches there.
Things. Oh, okay.
And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna roll through, you know, I have a lot of family that's incarcerated, and you know, it's just a whole nother like the boundaries, like the things that you can take away from a person. But when I listen to the poets that Michael works with, they always are just reinforcing that, like, you can take away everything else, but you cannot take away my thoughts, and you cannot take away my imagination. And at some point, you have to give me paper and a pencil, and we're gonna make it happen. And I just feel like that's it. Like, that's the foundational kind of beauty and privilege and power in poems, is that it's mine. Doesn't matter like where agency I don't have in my actual life or my material life. I can have it in this life that I make for myself, so that when maybe I have an opportunity, I know what to do, you know. I know what I want. I know what I think.
I'm going to dedicate it to you or give you props in some way, but I'm going to steal that line. I'm going to use it as a poem. What's it called? No one can gaslight me in my poems. Yeah, it's a great title.
Do it.
That's a great
Do
title.
it.
I'm a like fan club. Like, I have a fan club for like great epigraphs, and you have some great ones. You quote Audre Lorde: "The true focus of revolutionary change is never merely the oppressive situations which we seek to escape, but that piece of the oppressor which is planted deep within each of us, and which knows only the oppressor's tactics, the oppressor's relationships." And then you have Cherry Moraga, famous
Sherry,
one. Yeah. "Home is the place, for better, for worse, we learn to love." Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. But, you know, you've already talked a little bit about the idea of like the oppressor, the piece of the oppressor is planted within within us, within you, like, you know, without having agency in it. You know, so I mean, that's a deep, very deep one of Audre Lorde, of course. Oppressors and relationships and using the tactics. And then the Moraga one is more, I mean, it's shorter and to the point. Why the binary? Not that they're necessarily opposites, but why those two? And I gave you a binary, like there's a reason or not. Maybe there's not a reason. I don't know.
Well, I feel like they cover the territory that I'm thinking in. You know, the Audre Lorde is the social, you know, it's the social and the political, and that's she's you know, commenting on that territory of the dynamics of power and like identity there, which is why I see myself the way I do.
Sure.
You know, and with Sherry Moraga, it's like she's more in the, I think that quote is more in the territory of the domestic, like of the family, and of like inheritance. When I think of family, I don't just think of like my mom and dad, you know, I think of like the cultural lineage, you know, the inheritance. So it's like, you know, Audre Lorde's quote is like doing this, you know, and then Sherry Moraga's is doing this, you know, reaching back and reaching forward.
Okay.
And so I think that like a lot of the things, like the places I write from and the questions I have are about love and are about desire and are about like kind of the commodification and like the power dynamics in love and relationships, whether they're familial or romantic or friends or work. And I think that Audre Lorde's, you know, thinking is like, if we're learning how to live and how to do these things from our oppressors so that we have mirrored and become part oppressor, then how do we, you know, my question is like, how do we not oppress the people we love? Understanding that, like, how do we not oppress people we love as we try to love them? And how do we not oppress ourselves as we try to love and be loved? And that's my main, I think, question.
Wow.
And it's, I don't know. And it's just like, it's just the intuition that I have that we do that I do that. And so it's kind of a way to help those quotes frame my like perception of my entanglement, you know. I'm trying to get out. poetry's, there to help me kind of get out.
Oh, thank you for that explanation. Dang, there's a lot there. Obviously there are all kinds of ideas of identity, biculturalism, pochismo that you've talked about. The first poem is called Aslan. Aslan is like the mythical like homeland of, like, what's the importance of Aslan? Like, what's the symbolism of that?
Aslan is supposed to be like, the mythical homeland of the Aztecs, and it's current day like Mexico City. It's like where the eagle landed with the snake on the cactus, and that's how everyone knew like that was a place. And it's definitely a mythical place, but I also feel like, I don't know, sometimes I'm like have this thought that like Aslan is like a state of mind. And I think me and Alan both live there. I think a lot of us poets, a lot of us writers, a lot of us, we live there, like we're writing from there, like there's this power in like this thought of like, ooh, we used to have this power, but it's also like, damn, we also oppressed hella people to have that power. Like nothing that we just a lot of stuff that makes us feel proud is also stuff that hurt a lot of people, and I think sometimes, like, well, not sometimes, a lot of time, especially like when we're thinking about the Chicano canon, we're so just excited to have fucking Tomas Rivera. We're like, oh my God, we're so excited to have whoever, and we clutch to them because we've never had that. But then when we start realizing that, we want to do things different, like this wasn't cool, like that was very misogynist, we can't let go, because we're like, oh, we finally got to be proud for a moment.
I see.
Oh man, we can't, and it's that little crux place. Like I feel like that's Aslan-ish, It's like we want to be there, but we can't stay there.
I see.
Like it's a marker, just like the word pocha. It's a marker. It happened. It's cool. We're learning. But we're also like, there's a futurism if we choose to learn from it and use it for like as a tool for transformation, not as a destination.
Right. Well, one really cool one is Mexican Bingo. One of the lines from that is, quote, "I have twice inherited one language and lost my atlas to the fifth dimension of Chicanismo." Right. I love maybe at the end we'll have you read that, but yeah, I mean, you talk like Aslan, like even the like Mecha is like Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano Aslan, right? Like it even is part of like
I think
Mecha.
So.
Yeah, even part of the Mecha. Mexican Bingo, maybe we'll come back to that because I'll have you read that. But yeah, the idea of like the atlas that gets you to the fifth dimension is so cool. Some of the other lines about like these same themes are like, what makes a pocha like me Mexican? I would answer, loving someone until my love hurts us. Damn, that's deep. That's deep. Loving someone until my love hurts us. In Pocha Cafe, it's very like tongue in cheek. It's like, kind of listing things. I just picture it like a lilting like sound like coming up at the end, and like just like the layers of colonization, like you talk about better than I, like, just so many layers to it and so many things to think about. Pocha Heaven, there's women who don't cook and eat first, right? Like this imagined heaven. They don't have to cook and then wait. There's El Caminos with horns. There's jumping. Oh, the horns are jumping. There's mariachi or Depeche Mode, right? Either one. And what a great line. Something about God needs approval from the pochas and not the opposite. The women can dance without their backs hurting and like dance. That all labor is shared. No one walks away when anyone speaks. Just like, listy in a way, which could get redundant, but it's just like, oh man, what a great, so strong with images there. I never learned Spanish from I think one of the Narcissus poems, but I love myself anyways, right? You had cooking pozole, which is obviously such an important food. Study of a part-time pocha. I love the idea of like the expectations from a Eurocentric university. we write like things that are foisted upon you, I would think. Right? Quote,
yeah, they're always like, can you talk about identity? Hey, we're gonna go to this panel on this conference on identity. Can you talk about identity? I'm like, no, but you can, Jennifer.
They're always named Jennifer,
Crystal.
Huh? Oh man.
Yeah, I'm using code names, but you know who you are.
But yeah, I love like the line, let's scare white people with our Spanglish. Great Chicano Batman reference. And then I think kind of what you're getting at there is like, nah, quote, I'd rather work on decentering all this whiteness. And the collection ends with Dia of Tamales. My pocha marrow is not rascache, which I wanted to ask you about in a second. It decenters this woman I thought I would be. I looked into rascachismo. Am I saying it rascachismo?
Yeah, rascachismo. Yeah.
So I remember reading the book, actually called Los de Abajo. I want to say it was by Fuentes, maybe, but it was about like the Mexican Revolution. But so is it safe to say that rascachismo is like an underdog perspective? Like how do you use that? What is it? How do you use it in your work?
When I think of rascachismo, it's like what hipsters would call upcycling now.
Okay.
Or like, yeah, now like you can go buy something that's like recycled, upcycled, and they're like, oh my God, look at how like eco-friendly we're being. And I'm like, we've been doing that because we had to, and it's like, it's taking trash or things that you've thrown away or things that, and you don't have money, you're poor as heck. So you have to recycle and use those for different things the best you can. And like, you can make art out of it. Like if you go to my grandma's backyard, there's like 5 toilets in the backyard with these beautiful flowers coming out of it. It's like a little wonderland. Like there's old sinks, like there's tires that are garden beds, there's a place in Riverside called Tio's Tacos. And it's like a whole world, and there's these huge like 50 feet tall like mannequins made out of wire and beer bottles, all bottles, like, and it's cool, man. They have like whole like scarecrows made out of like different materials. It's really amazing. The inventiveness and like that's where when something's rasclache, that's what I think of.
Okay.
You having to make do with limited resources. Yeah.
Like everything's functional.
Yes. Yeah. Survival tactics part 2.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot in your collection about mothers and daughters, obviously. One of the lines is, quote, I wish my mother would tell me I was wrong. I believe from the point of view of the narrator, like she's, quote, hating and, quote, loving mom, like when she's cooking. It's kind of like there's like an admiration and also kind of like maybe not hating, but maybe more like feeling sorry for her.
Yeah, right? It's more like, I definitely like the poet Rachel McKibbins, who I love, and I should have mentioned earlier, is another just made me, I feel like I get to walk through like the Rachel's work and be to myself, shout out to Rachel's work her whole life, but that she says that she's a recovering misogynist and she's Chicana, and but that's the things like when you're Chicana, I think I've just internalized a lot of misogyny where I'm mad at my mom for being a wife, like for fitting into those gender roles.
Right.
But I also love when she makes me food, like, and it's like, how do I, and like some part of me is like, when I want her to tell me I'm wrong, I want her to be assertive. I want her to check me because I'm coming at her in this way that I'm correcting her, and I'm with my privilege and my education. Now I'm over here oppressing my own mom in the house, while she makes me food. How many fucking Chicano sons are out here, hungover, and their mom and their grandmas make them papas and eggs the next day. There's so much stuff we do in the relationships, the intimate relationships, that are just redundant systems of oppression. and it happens in the most intimate ways.
Right.
And I think, and it doesn't have to be male. It's, you know, it can be cross gender. You know, I do it to the women, I do it to myself.
Beautiful
and I love
line.
them.
Right. Beautiful lines. The sun sinks every time I try to give you tenderness. I quote, I shame my mother for her box Chardonnay, so I don't have to admit what bothers me most is her loneliness and how well my father, like this bartender, overpours it. Wow. 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 Mija, I believe is one of the names of the poems. What my mother still wants her mother to call and say. This like, I don't know, aspirational or like imaginative ideas, right?
Yeah, just to have some type of tenderness with her mom. You know, she wants her mom to just say she loves her, and she'll probably never do that. You know, never say she's sorry. She'll probably never do that. But she does it. I think my mom sometimes can be overbearing because all the things that she wanted, she just lays them on me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Mom, I want to be an independent person.
Well, no,
I don't want to be so coddled, but I want to, you know, she's got a lot to give.
Sure. Well, yeah, like you said, I mean, there's no it's not the same thing to say mija and my daughter, you know, they don't translate, right? It's just not the same. It has to be mija, you know.
It has to be, yeah.
You write so well about like generational trauma. I mean, you talked about a lot of that with like your mom and grandma, and you know, I know the name of the desert, the mother. There's a girl who does not cry, a woman who wonders what she did wrong. I am a daughter who walks through a desert carrying my mother's wounds. There's so much there. I trudge a lineage of exiled desire. If I could snap, I would for that one. I mean, you know, ideas of machismo. It never matters what I say unless it offends him. Oh man, that hits home, right? Just like my mother, I buy my own gifts. Play marriage, so I don't have to play dead. You must have kind of like stopped a few times and like dropped the mic on yourself, right? Like you don't want to shout yourself out too much. Like these are some lines that are like, whoa, they resonate. They really do. They really do.
I mean, they hurt, you know, they hurt to write, you know, like that's the most on when I said people try to be acceptable, like my students try to be acceptable sort of people in poems, like you can, but like I don't know what I would be changing or healing or transforming in myself if I wasn't like taking myself all the way to the edge of my own insight. You know, it's true, you know, it's not cute, but it's true. And until like we confront what it is, we cannot move past, we cannot transcend it, we cannot resolve it unless we know what we're dealing with. And those are the lines that, you know, it hurts to write and it sucks to recognize, but I'd rather be that. I'd rather hurt than be stuck, you know.
Well, I mean, you know, very open and honest, like with your brother and relationship there. One of the lines that really just got me was the poem is imagining my brother's return. Quote, hoping to hear him sing Boys to Men to himself like he did before he knew he would miss his son's first birthday. You know, that's like such an innocent thing, like, oh, Boys to Men. How good was Boys to Men, by the way? And then, you know, but like he knew he would miss his son's first birthday. It's like, I mean, there's so much there, so understated, right? I wonder about Narcissus, there are multiple poems about Narcissus. You know, the idea of, you know, Narcissus, like, was it that, you know, he wasn't allowed to recognize himself for his beauty, I think is like the story. Is there like, is there something about like self-denial? Is it like not, is it like a confidence thing, self-esteem? Like why so much about Narcissus? I wonder what.
I know, right? I think I had taken this class with Reza Aslan about Sufi poetry, and I'm just super
Reza Aslan,
obsessed.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. He's a Santa Clara grad, I believe, my school. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And I loved that class. Like that class was really influential. And I always thinking about the ways to like self-annihilation, you know, and we're like, he was having us do all kinds of stuff in that class, but like he was writing in Arabic.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was cool, you know, but I just got really obsessed with like one of the ways to getting free, you know, in like Islam or Sufi mysticism was self-annihilation. And so I think when I think about, that's what I think about when I think about Narcissus. And I always feel like there's like a lot of like dynamics where like writers or artists will like find a European or Eurocentric or like a Western myth like Narcissus, and then try to like rewrite their world to look like our, I don't know, try to like kind of move into there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, you come over here. I don't want to go over there. I don't need to go like talk about you come over here. Like instead of Narcissus looking in the pond, Narcissus is gonna look into her whiskey and soda, you know, and in this and come into my world. And in that way, I just don't. I wanted to reclaim the power. Whereas not having to identify myself within those like long held canonical archetypal stories, but like having them come to me in a way. And so Narcissus shows up because I'm thinking about, I have to think about myself so much that and learn so much about myself that I die in a sense. Like my ego dies, I go away, like the things that I thought that I was, like the thoughts I had about being stupid or not being listened to or not being good enough, those I have to look at them so much that they evaporate. And I realized that they were never true. And so that's kind of the dynamic of why I think about Narcissus. And I also just am like, you know, because in the stories it's a male figure, but in my book, it's a male and a female figure. And I think I'm just starting to think more about gender. And I never really felt, I don't know, I'm still working out. I identify as femme, but I don't really feel like a girl, and I don't feel like a boy either. I don't know. I don't know. I'm 35 and I'm just starting to ask and figure it out, because I never felt like these were questions I could ask, but I always felt it. And so I think that was kind of like the way of me starting to play with gender bending, you know, and myself and my own work, like becoming this historically male, you know, archetypal figure. Another last thing that's really I just really love about Narcissus is that his mother is a river. His mother is a river, and I'm like, you know, and I'm thinking about like alcoholism and inheritance and like culture and intergenerational trauma and like the water, like a river, like indigeneity, loss, you know, just like I just feel like it's the fact that Narcissus's mom is a river just illuminates a lot of feelings I have about my own place in this world and my place in my family, place with my mom.
Oh man, what a cool image of like evaporating that image, evaporating those previous thoughts and all. That's really cool. So many good poems. I can't pick a favorite. I wonder if you would maybe feel like reading one.
Sure.
Pocha Heaven, Mexican Bingo, or whatever you would like.
Okay. I'll read Mexican Bingo.
Awesome. I'm finding it and following along. If you got the book with you, and why don't you? You should you read along with us. It's page 16. Those of you listening.
So I wrote this poem because growing up in Fresno, we used to go. There's a little town called Raisin City, and my mom's Aunt Rosa and her Uncle Gilbert. Uncle Gilbert was like a tech for the farm equipment on a dairy. As I lived on a dairy, and we'd always be there playing cards. We gamble. I like been gambling since I was like 4. Gamble really hard, but we would play Mexican Bingo, and I was so, like I mentioned, so ashamed. Like I would refuse to say the Spanish words. I was like disgusted by Spanish. Like that's where I'm coming from, y'all. Like it's crazy. But they wouldn't let me play, and they would say you'd have to say them in Spanish or otherwise we're not going to let you in. And I have obviously a lot of ideas about those dynamics. So
is this loteria, or is this a different form called Mexican bingo?
it's loteria. It's loteria. But I won't even call it loteria. I only call it Mexican. See, it's deep. Mexican bingo. My family won't let me play unless I call the cards in Spanish. La botella, el apache, el cantarito. We cover our cards with beans we can barely see against our skin. Plop down tough little hearts of dirt that might split in our hands. We become cliches. My cousin Ruby strolls through the house in a black tube top, asking if anyone wants a tattoo in Old English. An ashtray brims with Virginia Slims and cooled butts and weed we can't fit in the joint. My tia asked me to order the inmate package for Daniel. Use Golden State Care, mija. I heard from Rachel that they were the best. I ordered 10 top ramens and a pair of Nike Cortez for my cousin who lives in a box at Wasco. I can't help but think he's built it himself. We say our own names for the people on the cards. La Chalupa is the hoe in the boat. El Negro is my cousin's Oaxacan boyfriend, Sleepy. El Soldado is my brother in Iraq. El Borracho is my Theo Gilbert, splayed on the couch. El Corazon is my sister, the only reason my father does not leave. And El Diablo, my mother says that's me. No matter how many chances I get to correct, no matter how much my tia glares, I cannot call the cards by their rightful names if I don't have one. We are both El Apache and La Dama, the lost and the found. I have twice inherited one language and lost my atlas to the fifth dimension of Chicanismo. The words we never asked for make us illegible. Nights like this, I drink to remember the friar forcing my R's with curled leather, the quiet God making my A's a little dirtier. I reclaim mutilation, roll it like a velvet red carpet to the dining table, play the appropriator, play the priest, but not the pocha, not here, just the halves of myself I never wanted to be. I know I'll be ashamed of it tomorrow. That's why I'm praying with my hands in my coat. That's why I throw the beans away every time.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We are both El Apache and La Dama, the lost and the found. The idea of drinking to remember, not drinking to forget.
Mm-hmm.
Praying with the hands in the coat, those images at the end, throwing the beans away every time. The box that the writer thinks, says the cousin he kind of built for himself.
Mm-hmm.
Can't help but think of that. So many strong images. And yeah, I feel like it couldn't be otherwise than the prose way that it's written. Like it just doesn't seem like it would work some way else, just because it just comes together perfectly there. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Are you talked about working on other stuff. Is there ever going to be like a screenplay or fiction, or you're like, I'm a poet, I write poetry? Like, do you have plans of any other type of writing, or do you feel like for now you're good with where you're at?
Well, I've written screenplays.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I have, but my master's is in poetry and screenwriting, so I've written screenplays. I don't know if they're my future. I haven't written much like in a long time, but I do write a lot of skits. Just I don't share them with anybody. Me and my sister will write them together, but we write a lot of skits, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should just start making them for fun. I don't know. That might be something on the horizon. Nice. And I write, I do mess around with essays and stuff. I just I don't know. Like I said, I have a lot of stuff. I just don't know if I'm gonna put it out anywhere. And I also, I'm kind of interested in writing music too, like writing
Nice.
raps. I
Yeah.
don't know. I've just had this thing the last few months. I'm like, oh, I just really want to do it, but I feel like wrong, like I shouldn't. I don't know. I might just do it alone in my room for a year and then come out. Who knows? But yeah, I
SoundCloud.
definitely, yeah. Be on lookout.
You know? All
Yeah,
right.
but poetry for sure.
Oh man. So yeah, the 2019 collection is Heart Like a Window, Mouth Like a Cliff. It's through Noemi Press, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you're on Twitter and Instagram as well?
Yeah, mostly Instagram though. Twitter stresses me out.
Okay. 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 So you can check her out there. And I'm just thank you so much for letting me read this as American Book Award winner. And it led me on to other writers and vice versa. They led me to you.
Mhm.
And it's just
Mhm.
such the reading makes you think. Of course, the poems make you think for sure. There's some just like standout lines that just aesthetically are just like, oh wow. And
Mhm.
it's so cool to be able to talk to you about the process, what's going through your head and all of that. And
Mhm.
so cool to get the background story. So really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for making this podcast and me just caring, caring about work like this
Yeah.
and being that bridge because I wish I would have heard a podcast like this when I
Hmm.
was any age,
Right.
and it really does mean a lot that you make this happen. So thank you too.
Wow, I really, really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. Thank you. And we'll have you back on when the second collection comes out or the album. And
Dang, pressure's
love to
on.
have you, right? No, I'll wait.
Sophomore album.
It's like Dr. Dre's album that took 15, 20 years. It's always coming, it's always coming. So if it's
Yeah.
2040, that's all good too,
Okay.
but and hopefully it sounds like my students may have the luck to be able to speak with you one of these days too. So appreciate so much your
Yeah.
generosity of time and spirit, and great luck in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to episode 99 with Sara Borjas. You can now subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. You can ask for it by name using Alexa, find it on Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music. Follow me on Instagram, where I'm at Chills at Will Podcast, or on Twitter, where I'm at Chills at Will PO1. And yeah, try not to give to Amazon. Amazon doesn't need any more of your money. But anyways, all right. And sorry, there's a little aside there. What's a good way? What's a good like independent bookstore or place to buy your book? Any shout outs to the local
Uh,
places? Any
you
Fresno spots or
know,
Riverside or whatever?
they don't have it. They don't have, I would buy it. I'll say buy it directly from the press,
Okay.
the Noemi Press website. And if
Okay.
not, bookshop, because a
Yeah.
bookshop will distribute that money the best
Nice.
way.
Nice. And Noemi is spelled Noemi.
Yes.
You can watch this and other episodes on YouTube and subscribe while you're there. This is a passion project of mine, a DIY operation. And I'd love for your help in promoting what I'm convinced is a unique and spirited look at an often ignored art form. The intro song for the Chills at Will podcast is Wind Down instrumental, and the other song played on the episode was Hoops instrumental by Matt Whitehour, and both songs are used through archesaudio.com. Please tune in for the next episode, and I don't know who's going to be yet. Got a couple people up in the air, but it's going to be episode 100, which I cannot believe, and it'll air on January 18th. For now, thanks again for listening, and I hope that these quarantine days bring you texts by writers with mad skills, like Sara Borjas, whose work, like Heart Like a Mountain, Mouth Like a Cliff, gives you chills at will.